So to my left, I have Eunice Kindred. She's the VP Group Art Supervisor at Neon Agency, and she has called the FCB Health Network her home for the past 10 years. She is a cum laude graduate of Harvard University, where she earned a Bachelor's of Science in Visual and Environmental Studies, and she's the recipient of numerous awards, including the Bronze Clio and the DTC Perspectives Gold Award. To her left, we have Gene Varnado. He's the VP Creative Director at FCB Chicago, and he has spent the past 13 years of his career within the FCB family, working on accounts like CVS, Nokia, and John Deere, and is now the creative lead for both Boeing and MFS Investment. He holds a degree in graphic design from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, and is the recipient of numerous awards, including Cannes Lions, the One Show Awards from the Clio Awards, and the Telly Awards.
Yes.
And lastly, we have Christina Powell. She's the Director of Diversity and Inclusion at Omnicom, and she is responsible for leading a global Omnicom-wide inclusion strategy that focuses on the recruitment, advancement, and retainment of diverse talent. She's a graduate of the University of South Florida and holds degrees in both aviation flight science and communications. She is currently a member of 4A's Multicultural Advertising Intern Program Alumni Board after serving as its president from 2013 to 2015. And she has received numerous awards, including ADCOLOR's Unsung Hero Award in 2012, JWT Innovator of Change Award in 2014, and recognized as a maker in 2017. So let's jump right into it. Each of you guys have pretty unique unique backgrounds coming into the industry. Can you guys give us a brief synopsis of what interested you about advertising and marketing years ago, and how have you seen the industry evolve over the years? Ooh. You want to start first?
Sure. I got into advertising by chance. I was working in publishing, and I was looking for a change, and it just so happened that my coworker, who was a copywriter, was like, oh, I have a friend at FCB. You should apply. And I never had heard of like healthcare advertising or anything. So I sent my resume, and they called me in, and just by chance, the creative director took a chance. He was like, I see you can draw. I want you in. So I was like, okay. My book was mainly marketing promotional, not like ad concepts, but they really honed my talent. I got to learn everything. I jumped around in various teams, and they were all pretty small, so it kind of helped develop me faster, and it gave me a lot of responsibility early on, and I think that's kind of what helped me. And it was also just kind of like a family feel. You're in the trenches for all those pitches and late night deadlines and all that kind of stuff, so I've always just kind of loved that combination of kind of using your brain and having to like deliver messages, and I've been at FCB ever since.
Awesome. And now what about you, Gene? Because I know you also have a graphic design.
Yeah, so my degree was in graphic design, and so when I came into advertising, I kind of fell in backwards. When I first started, it was like way back in the day when things were done by hand and on the computer, right? And we sent a lot of faxes. And then my first job, I told my the woman who owned it, I was like, hey, there's this thing called the internet. And she was like, oh, okay. It's like, we should do that. And she's like, okay, I don't know what that is, but sure, do it. So, you know, that kind of tells you where I started. Then I left that, went to this place called Spiegel Catalog. And Spiegel Catalog was this thing that was a catalog back in the day. Back in the day, it was a book where you would buy things, right? And back then, it was like a big deal. So Spiegel Catalog, I was there for a while, and then the internet happened to Spiegel, and it went away. And so my boss left and ended up in advertising, and he was like, hey, I'm taking you with me. So I kind of bounced around from a couple of small shops, and then I eventually ended up at FCB. And I think that the thing that I've seen the most change in is like, you know, going from, you know, doing things by hand to like the internet to now where things are not even internet, it's social media. Like social media is the big thing. And, you know, so we move from, you know, being on the browser to being on your phone, right? Like you do most of your stuff on Twitter and Facebook. And so I think that there's been a huge evolution, but I think that the way creatives end up staying relevant is the fact that creatives by nature are really curious. And I think that that helps you to sort of transcend a lot of things that end up moving and shifting. So.
And now, Christina, how did you get into advertising? Because you have a degree in aviation.
Yeah.
So take us through that journey.
So my initial focus was aviation flight science with a trajectory to be a commercial pilot. But why would anybody want to be a commercial pilot? We can work in this industry. And I first learned about advertising as a viable career, as a place where you could continue to be a creative and get paid. My senior year in college, and I learned about it through the MAPE program. Do we have MAPE alumni? So my big break in advertising was MAPE, and the reason I've stayed in this industry is because of organizations like ADCOLOR, like AAF, Most Promising, like One Club, that continues to build a community so I don't have to feel alone. And I've been in the industry for 10 years, and how has the industry changed in 10 years? Oh my good God. Coming into this industry was before the iPhone, was before Snapchat, Instagram, Uber. So the mediums have changed a lot, but has it changed that much? Because at the end of the day, we're storytellers. And so the medium can change, but we still have to tell authentic stories.
Nice. Now there's this term that's been around for years, diversity. And over time, the definition of diversity has changed to mean a lot of different things. All of you guys are executives within your field. You do a lot of work with putting teams together, impacting work culture. How do you all ensure that racial inclusion is not forgotten when people talk about diversity at your company?
I think for me, in terms of diversity and inclusion, it boils down to like the everyday level. And you can talk about it, but you also need to participate in it. And that means putting yourself out there or joining teams who might need an extra person. And even if you don't know anybody on that team, to go and lend a hand. Social events at the office. I mean, that's usually where those relationships kind of start to gel, and you want to be part of those too. Like, don't just kind of do your own thing. Like I DJ at Neon for our happy hours, or we celebrate a big pitch win, like I'll DJ that, and that's how I get to know more and more people, and everybody starts to feel more comfortable, and you have that relationship that I feel like, that ladders up to the whole agency environment as a whole. So I feel like that's how the steps I take to be involved.
What about you, Gene?
Yeah, I think that diversity and inclusion is probably one of the biggest things that we have, one of the biggest challenges that we have in the agency and with advertising in general. And I think one of the things that happened at our agency was we have a sentiment analysis that happens every year. And so I'll just tell this brief story. For our company, the sentiment analysis among minorities kind of like dipped. Like, it basically measures like how you feel about the company, and it dipped. And so there was two women at my company, Danielle Wilborn and Leah McGee, that they wanted to know, like, well, why did that happen? So what they did was amazing. They went around and interviewed all of the minorities and said, like, why are you feeling the way you're feeling? And then they ended up pulling me in, and they said, hey, can you help us, make sense of all of these interviews? And I was like, why do you need my opinion? And they were like, because you're old. And I was like, that hurts my feelings, and whatever. So what ended up happening out of that was there was a report that we made a lot of recommendations for the agency. And we presented that report to the president of the company, who's Michael Foshnat. And throughout all the recommendations, I think that for me, one of the ones that I think I'm most proudest of is that one of the recommendations was that we need to reach out to different streams for talent. And so that led to us partnering with this organization in Chicago called YCA, which is Young Chicago Authors. And what they do is they sponsor this competition called Louder Than a Bomb. And if you haven't heard of Louder Than a Bomb, it's a competition, which is an Olympic-style competition, which is really dope. They have spoken word people, students, sort of compete from all the high schools across Chicago. And it happens every year. And so what we did was we partnered with them, and they actually, performed at our open house, and it was amazing. But our goal is to extend that. Like, our plan is to continue to extend that, and what we want to do is, mentor them and, hopefully create a program where we have internships, because we want to expose advertising not only and give people opportunities that would not necessarily know about advertising, know that it's a creative field, like you mentioned, that it is this opportunity, but also it's an opportunity for us to, like this, tap into something that we may not have thought of. It's a different kind of stream to attract talent, right? These really talented kids. So that's sort of a long way of saying, like, I think that, reaching out and figuring out like different ways to find talented people is how we can continue to push and expand the culture of advertising.
Nice. And what about for you, Christina?
I don't think the definition of diversity has changed. I think our focus on a specific part of diversity, or what's quote unquote trending. And I look at it over the span of different administrations. During the Bush administration, we were focused on racial diversity. And then we move into an Obama White House, and all of a sudden, there's conversation that we're post-racial. And we move to focus on, we move away from racial diversity and we move towards gender diversity and people talking about diversity of thought. And the challenge there was, in the gender diversity conversation, often women of color were left behind. And when we focus solely on gender diversity, we're leaving out Black, Asian, and Latino men, who are often some of the most underrepresented in creative industries. And then we move into the Trump administration, and now we're back. The pendulum has swung completely back to racial diversity. So I don't think the definition changes. I think our focus changes. And even LGBT, we kind of took our brakes off of LGBT diversity because we're like, marriage equality, love wins, do we still need to focus on this? And the answer is we need to the definition of diversity is focusing on all of those and the intersection of all of those.
Now, Eunice and Jean, you guys both touched on diversity and inclusion, and those are two terms that a lot of times people loop together and think they're one and the same. Christina, as the Director of Diversity and Inclusion at Omnicom, can you explain the difference between the two, and what do you think companies can do to ensure that they are having a work culture that's inclusive of both?
I mean, people keep trying to rename diversity and inclusion. I think it's perfectly fine. And I do think they're different. I think diversity is more of the, and this is in my opinion, because other people have opinions about this, but I think diversity is more of the quantitative aspect and inclusion is more of the qualitative aspect. The diversity part is more of the getting the people, and the inclusion is more of keeping the people. So, you know, diversity is numbers, it's policy, it's legal, it's benefits for trans people, it's maternity and paternity leave. Diversity is the ingredients, and the inclusion piece is the company culture, the culture of belonging. Is this a bro culture? Is this a creative culture? Is this a culture of belonging? It's employee resource groups, and it's the inclusion part is the one that we can all take part in. It's the one that we're all responsible for, making a culture where everybody feels that they can come and do the best work of their lives. That's inclusion. Diversity, we have to look at who the people are and the numbers and casting the right teams. And that's the part where you absolutely need a professional who is overseeing that. You would never have a creative company without a creative officer. You need a diversity officer. You need somebody who's looking at that, who's looking at the nuances of that role. So diversity, inclusion, and they have to live together if we're gonna create change.
Nice. And Jean, I want to go back to you for a second. You talked a lot about basically tapping into the talent pipeline and where you guys are going to actually find talent.
Right.
I know there are a lot of young professionals in the room who are just starting out their career. All of you guys can touch on this, but what do you look for in new talent? Like what can new talent bring to the table that makes them stand out?
So I think one of the main things that I look for in new talent is creativity, obviously, but also the ability to think. I think that those two things will help you be successful. I mean, because the way that I look at, there are a million ways to skin a cat, but given my background, the way that I look at creative is that you're presented with a brief, and what our job is to solve the problem in the most creative and compelling way, right? And so those two things have to go together, right? So if you are strictly just being creative without solving the problem, then you're not going to have success and you're not going to make the client happy, and it just kind of leads to problems. So I think that when I'm looking at a portfolio, what I'm looking for is obviously the creativity that you bring to it, but also the problem solving and the thought that went into that.
Nice. Christina or Eunice, do any of you guys?
Definitely in healthcare too, when we have such a science-heavy medium and information that we have to get across, thinking is definitely on the top of the list, and also just being able to convey and solve problems across the board, and also just the resourcefulness. If you could present beautiful work, but you have to know the material, you have to get into the trenches of the data, and you have to learn too. So I think that's also crucial in what I look for when I look at work and portfolios.
Nice. Did you want to?
Maybe, how quickly can you learn a new skill? There's some interesting things going on with not looking at resumes, and past is not necessarily prelude, but how quickly can you be agile and move from being just a designer to a UX designer. I think the skill of the future is how quickly you can learn something rather than what you already know.
Nice. And all of you guys have years of experience in the industry, and you all touched on how it's sort of evolved since you first entered. Where do you see the industry going in maybe about 5 to 10 years from now, and what do you hope the conversation around diversity will look like then?
New administration. 5 years.
I'll go. I agree with that. But in addition to that, I kind of feel like I have a personal stake in this because I have 2 children. I have a son and a daughter. And my daughter, I'll talk about her for a second, is unapologetically black. She loves everything about she loves the hair, she's got the kinky hair, she's got the, she twists it, she got the fro, she loves everything about being black. That's the first thing about her. The second thing about her is that she has dyslexia. So she's had a challenge with that since she was a kid, right? And the way that I've talked to her about it, and the way that her mother and I have talked to her about it, is dyslexia is a challenge that you have to overcome, but it's also your superpower because it helps her because she's an extremely visual thinker, right? One day I was at home working on my laptop, and she was 8, however old you are when you're this tall. So she walks up behind me, and I'm working, and she looks at what I'm working at for 3 seconds, and then she says, "This needs to move here, this needs to move there, that needs to get bigger, and then that needs to go away." And then she walked out the room. And so I was just sitting there for a couple of seconds, and I'm looking, and I'm like, she was right. So I did what she said. Now I say that to say, she's a really smart kid, and you fast forward now she's, 19 years old and just started her first year at Rhode Island School of Design. And so I think that what I would like, especially because she's in school now, what I would like for the next 3, 5, 10 years is I want the industry to move beyond just a conversation about diversity. I think we need to be, by then, we need to be in implementation. We need to be in action, because I think that we need to be in a place where kids like my daughter, kids like you guys here, kids like the ones that are in, Young Chicago Authors or, Louder Than a Bomb, are welcome and have an opportunity in advertising, because I think what that's going to end up doing is not only expand the culture of advertising to be welcoming, but I think it's going to be more reflective in the work, right? And if we can have that reflection in the work, I think that those kinds of things will have a powerful impact on society, right? Because that's the kind of thing that people consume. They consume media, and if they can start to see themselves, that's going to start to change things. So that's what I hope happens in like 5 years, or whenever my daughter gets out of college, so she can have a job and all that good stuff. So that's my thought.
I mean, I made the joke about Trump in the White House, and in 5 years, God willing, he's not in the White House, but having somebody like Donald Trump, who's an agitator, a disruptor, and a little bit of a boogeyman, does bring the focus squarely back to racial diversity, which is our industry's biggest challenge. And in 5 years, I don't want us to think that we're past this conversation or the execution or the need to talk and act on this issue, because it didn't take us 5 years to get here. It's not going to take us 5 years to get out of here. So in 5 years, I hope we're still talking about it, executing plans. It's in 5 years, seniors right now will be entering the workforce. So are we talking to those seniors? In 5 years, people right now that are 3 years in the business will be entering that critical point where this industry loses a lot of people of color. So I think we're going to have to keep working 5 years. I think in 5 years, if we have a different person in office, we still need to act as if there is a disruptor and not get amnesia. So I look forward to working with you guys all in 5 years.
I mean, I've had a different personal experience kind of being in this industry for such a long time, used to being the only person of color in the creative department for a while, and then now I feel like definitely implementing and keep not forgetting that and always working towards that. At Neon, I feel like it's funny, we have like 3 or 4 now Black art directors. I'm like, yes. and girls too, which is such a refreshing change, and it's so good to see, but to also just kind of always be open. And a couple months ago, I went to a middle school and gave a talk to a classroom of boys, and they were all like, what do you do? And I'm like, I work in advertising. They're like, oh, like you sell Nike shoes or something? I was like, no. Actually, I sell drugs, but in a different way. And they're all like, what? And then it just exposing, and whenever you can, if you're in a group of young crowds, to kind of just open their eyes to that this industry exists. There's a place for you. There's a place to be creative, and just being open to that.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Can we give our panelists a round of applause? We're now going to open the floor up for at least 3 questions. I believe someone is in the audience with a mic. Also, if you're still on social media, remember to use the hashtag #CreativityInColor, and also on Instagram, follow them at @CreativityInColor. Someone right here.
Hi there, it's to the lady to my right.
Yes?
Christina, yeah.
With the nice bangs?
Yes, exactly. You were talking about within 5 years, there's a loss of people of color in the creative community in 5 years, whatever that was. Can you talk why does that happen? I'm just curious. Thank you.
I think there's, it's more of when they reach towards the mid-level. That's when, as the industry, we see a drop-off. And the why, I think we can all point to reasons why. I think seeing people in leadership, that gives you that sense of belonging and that sense that you could be in leadership too. I think it's the culture, it's a community. I think it's working in the industry long enough where we have to feel like we're imposters, where we can't be ourselves at work. I think that starts to weigh on you. I think there's other things outside of our companies where we're finding community that's keeping us in this industry. Advertising is also having a war on talent with the tech industry and going client side and working for a startup and working for yourself. So I think all of those are contributing factors to why we lose people of color, but I think the predominant one is the company culture. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Do we have any other questions?
Hi, my name's Alexis. So Christina's point earlier I thought was really interesting about sort of discussing diversity rather in terms of sort of presidential administrations, and like when we were here, we thought about diversity in this way. And I think it sort of illustrated the fact that like the way we talk about diversity is reactive always. And in advertising, that's manifest as like Pepsi made this tone-deaf thing that blew up in their face, so we need more XYZ in the room. Mm-hmm. And what happens there is like a sort of a role taken on by diverse people in advertising of being like the safety valve of like, is this gonna, and I'm wondering what it takes to move beyond that sort of language surrounding diversity of like, we need this to make sure things don't go wrong, and more of a sort of proactive, like, we need this because it's going to make the entire industry better. So I'm wondering what that takes, you know, at the level you're all at, like what do you believe that'll take to move the way we talk about diversity forward in that way?
I think your question is, we're now at a point where we can talk about diversity as not just the right thing to do. We can talk about it with data, and we can talk about it with numbers. Is that your question?
I guess like when we, like how can this entire industry move past like seeing diversity as a way to prevent disaster, or as a way to like, you know, as a just in case thing? How can it, the way we talk about it, become, you know, either second nature or like, I mean, we don't talk about.
I mean, I think we are talking about it a little bit. We're talking about how diversity of teams can tell more authentic stories. Mm-hmm. I don't think diversity right now is just positioned as insurance. Anybody else?
Yeah, I think that I think that it kind of taps into what you were saying before, that one of the things that we have to get past is like we have to find a way. I think the first step is find a way to make advertising more welcome, right? I think that's step one. Mm-hmm. You know, once we can start to make advertising more welcome and bring in these diverse points of view and stories, my thought is like that's going to expand the conversation. That's going to expand what comes out. If you've got, you know, more African Americans, like you're going to have, to your point, more authentic stories that come out of that and more expression of that. And, you know, as we've seen in popular culture, you know, those things matter. Those things start to impact the culture, right? I was in a cab this morning with this guy who was a driver, and he was telling me that he works on the TV show. What's that TV show by with Lee Daniels?
Empire.
Empire. Yeah. So he works on Empire, and he was talking about the fact that when Empire was launched, it like broke all of the records for television watching, like 15 million. It's got 15 million, people that follow it. And that's because it's just a compelling story. It's something that nobody has ever seen before. Like nobody had ever seen that before, right? And so I think that if we can welcome that kind of thinking into advertising, like it's going to naturally expand the conversation, the expression. And so then we'll be able to move beyond these kind of reactionary things because the stories and the creative and the things that come out of it will be authentic. So that's just how I think that we're going to start to move forward. But step one, we just have to figure out how to expand and open the door, to make it more welcoming. Does that answer your question?
Hi, how are you? So I'm just got a position in advertising as entry level. And my question to you all would be, for someone who is entry level or feel like they're kind of at the bottom of the totem pole, how are they able to position their voice to inspire these conversations about diversity and inclusion or inspire these conversations about implementation compared to people who may be mid-level or higher up in the totem pole and, are able to have that effect in people's lives? Like, what would be your voice to people who are trying to do that as well, who are kind of just not yet, I guess, in that position yet?
That's a great question.
Mm-hmm. I think when I was at junior level, when I first started, the first thing I was worried about is making sure I could keep up. So it was just in terms of just the work environment, it's just so different to what I was used to, and just learning and just taking it all in. So I think first you need to know the landscape before I would start to be more of, pushing my views out or anything. But definitely you want to be observant and just kind of know what's going on. And just
no, definitely. You have to be, best way to show your company that diversity matters is for you as an individual to be excellent and to be undeniable. That's step one.
The work,
Yes,
your work.
Yeah. But I know this generation though they are so purpose driven, which is amazing. we don't want to calm that fire because it's a creative expression, but it's also purpose driven, and you want to be able to do that work too. But I think being so young, you can talk to, on the weekend, after you're done your work, talk to high school students about this being a viable industry for them. Because we'd be shocked at so many people that don't know this multi-billion-dollar industry where I can work on creative work that's not Hollywood, that's not, Broadway. It's, share it with high school students.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that the beginning of your career is going to be hustling. Mm-hmm. You're just going to have, you're going to have to hustle. And it's not going to be glamorous, but you're going to, two things, you're going to prove yourself and you're going to learn a lot, right? And once you gain that experience, when you get to the next level, that's going to help you when you do need to speak up, right? Because you will have proven yourself and you will have hustled, and then people are going to be more likely to listen to what you have to say. So I would say be prepared for, for hustling.
I thought you were going to say war.
It's about the same.
Same thing.
Give me a run for my money. I am an advertising adjacent creative, so I've been an in-house designer at a number of different companies for about 4 or 5 years now. I'm recognizing that I would like to make the transition into advertising solid. I was wondering if you have any suggestions, atypical suggestions for how to align myself with the appropriate individuals that would give me an opportunity to make that shift.
Omnicom's hiring. Come talk to me after.
So when you say, so when you say that you're in an adjacent field, like, does that mean like you're creative or?
I'm a graphic designer, but I have worked doing things such as like production, deal toys, and mementos on Wall Street. I've been an in-house marketing and graphic designer for nonprofits. I've done, the one-stop shop. You hire the one person, and they're like, I need everything, and I'm that person, and I'm at a point where I'm ready to focus more so on strategic development of creative ideas and to create things that I am allowed to have some sort of stock in, feel a little more for, and express myself and also further the company, as opposed to just, we need this, we need this, we need this.
Yeah. Okay, so 2 things. I think that, one, I think that you're close. I think that the good thing about what you already do is you've already demonstrated, like I'm sure in your portfolio, that you've demonstrated like that you can do all of these things, that you can execute, and that there's thought behind everything that you would do. So I would just say, put yourself out there and continue to interview, because I think that you're going to be valuable. I think coming to something like this and is tremendous. I think the second thing is that be prepared though that I need this, and I need this, that's not gonna go away. Like that's that's the reality of this industry as well. So. But I think that you're well prepared if you've already been accustomed to that. I think that you're well prepared to make that transition.
I think I had a similar background to you. When I first came in, I worked in publishing as well and did a lot of graphic design stuff outside of work. And I think concepting is very important, and kind of just, even if it's in terms of thinking of how would I do an ad for such and such brand, and putting that in your book. And when you go for interviews, maybe getting the feedback of the people who are looking at your books and seeing what they're saying and kind of taking that to heart, and maybe always refreshing and always like trying to make it better. And then you'll start to get traction. All it takes is just that one person just to give you that chance, really.
We have time for one last question over there.
Hi, my name is KP. I'm very passionate about diversity and inclusion, and I'm at the point where I'm working with a team trying to build something for the school that I go to, but we're kind of running into roadblocks with staff and faculty. So what's a way to, because it is a very important topic, and I believe the school will get better if we talk about it more, but if the senior level isn't listening to us, then what would be advice on how to handle that?
So nothing exists. You know that nothing exists already, because a lot of universities are.
Well, there's something we're part of the bigger, we're just a section off of the bigger university, but the way we do things is completely different. So it's kind of like we're not a part of them. So everything that we do has to kind of be our own. So they have a whole diversity and inclusion plan. It's like all these pages. I've read it. It's great. But they want to be able to formulate their own thing. So, but I think there's just a lot of different opinions that are running around. And I'm at the point where I just want to get something done because I know the people coming after me need it.
And you're a senior?
Yes.
Do you want to talk after and we can come up with a plan?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, thank you guys so much. Hopefully you enjoyed our amazing panelists.